Madam Chair, you have a live mic.
Thank you. I'd like to call the August 20. Okay, so she can hear us right now? Great. Okay, super. Okay, if everyone will please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to begin our meeting by congratulating Vice Chair Waters and Mr. Hill for their reappointment by the governor to the Big Cypress Basin Board.
Thank you.
And in addition, I'd like to congratulate our new board members, Mr. Michael Romano, Ms. PJ Smith, and Ms. Michelle McLeod, who's joining us remotely today. Congratulations on your appointments to the Big Cypress Basin Board. I'd now like to ask our new board members to join me in front of the dais for the oath of office. Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your full name. Do solemnly swear that I will faithfully perform the duties delegated to me by law as a member of the Big Cypress Basin Board, which I have been appointed. That I will uphold my duties and obligations to the citizens of Southwest Florida. Congratulations. If you would remain with me, please, and if I could ask Mr. Hill and Vice Chair Waters to come down and join us for a board photo. You can move out a little bit from there. Yeah. One on each side. The one on each side will even it out.
Within the sentence. And 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1.
Great, thank you. I'll have them up. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. As a reminder, today's meeting is accessible by Zoom, as well as Collier TV and the district's website. Board members, just as a reminder, I'd like to ask you while speaking, please use the buttons on the dais to be recognized, and please check your microphones to make sure they're on when you're speaking so that everyone can hear you. Ms. McLeod, please use the raise the hand feature on Zoom and Troy will call on you. He will actually enter your name on my screen so you can be recognized. If you're participating via phone, *9 raises your hand and *6 mutes and unmutes your phone. For those here in person, if you would like to comment on an agenda item, please fill out a speaker slip that's available in the hallway and bring that speaker card to Troy Miller, who's sitting right here to my right. If you're joining by Zoom, use the raise the hand feature and Troy will call on you. And if you're participating via phone, *9 raises your hand and *6 mutes and unmutes. Hopefully everyone is familiar with some of these procedures already, and that was just a refresher. But if you have any questions, just reach out and we'll be glad to help you. That brings us to agenda revisions. Ms. Keeler, do you have any changes to the agenda at this time?
No, Madam Chair, there are no revisions.
Okay, thank you. Abstentions by board members from items on the agenda. I'm going to poll each one of the board members to see if you have any abstentions or disclosures for items on the agenda. I'll begin with Vice Chair Waters.
None for me, ma'am.
Mr. Hill,
None.
Ms. McLeod,
None.
Mr. Romano,
None.
Ms. Smith,
None.
and I do not have any. That brings us to the approval of the minutes of the April 28th, 2023 Big Cypress Basin Board meeting. First of all, are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? If not, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Make a motion to approve.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? That passes unanimously. That brings us to the Basin Administrator's Report. Ms. Keeler.
Thank you and good morning. And once again, congratulations to our existing board members on your reappointment and our new board members on joining us here at the Basin. We're happy to have you a part of the district family. There's two things that I really want to highlight with you today. The first is a good news item on our communication tower. We had some challenges to work through over the last year with gopher tortoises and migratory birds, and as well as getting approval from the FAA on the new location of the tower. And I'm happy to report today that those issues have all been resolved. We just received approval from the FAA maybe a month ago, and the tower is now under design, which will wrap up in the springtime. And we're hoping that construction will start this time next year. It will still take another 2 years through construction and getting all of the dishes in place. But it will be a very important feature for us, as it will make our flood control system much more resilient. Just as a reminder for you is that right now everything is hooked up through our cell phone towers. And so when we have a storm, we all lose cell phone service first thing, starting a storm. Well, we also lose connectivity to our flood control system. So this is a huge step for us in making our community and our flood control system more resilient. So we're really happy that this is finally moving ahead. The second item I want to talk about is our cooperative agreement with Collier County. We began the first agreement with the county back in 1979. It has gone through several changes and amendments over the years, with the last one being in 2012. It is time again to renew that agreement, and I've had the pleasure over the last couple of months of coordinating this effort with Collier County staff and the county manager's office. And it's always a pleasure to work with them, and I appreciate their tight coordination on this to have this for you today and move it through our process. Before I give you some highlights, I also want to thank our Basin team. As you all know, we're a small team, but it takes a lot of people to work on things. Brad Jackson and Andy Potts worked on updating some of those outdated maps and exhibits. And so I thank them for their effort, but I also would be remiss if I don't thank and recognize Derek Brown for all of the work he did. He actually wrote the agreement, put it all together, checked it. He does an amazing job for us at the Basin. So I want to thank Derek for his efforts on that. So the major changes in this agreement, really besides the amendments and exhibits being updated, is addressing the canals being filled in the Picayune Strand Restoration Agreement, and for the district to design and rebuild two of the county's major outfall structures. This is a huge win for this community to have the watersheds being completely controlled for the Gordon River and the, excuse me, and the Palm River watershed. Having one agency operate those weirs is a big bonus in flood control and resiliency for the community. So we will be designing and rebuilding two structures. And then the county, there's a payment plan in the agreement that the county will pay for those activities over the next 5 years. So those are really your big major changes, coming in this particular amendment for the cooperative agreement. And unless you have any questions about it, then I will be moving this forward with the county staff to go before the Board of County Commissioners at their September meeting, and then to our district governing board for final approval and execution at their October meeting. So that's all I have. And Madam Chair, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Are there any questions for Lisa on her report? Thank you so
All
much.
right, thank you.
That brings us to general public comments. Mr. Miller, is there any comment cards?
I have no cards submitted at this point and no hands raised on Zoom, Madam Chair.
All right, that makes it easy. Thank you so much.
Sorry, I just had a hand go up. Too good to be true. Keith, I'm going to try to say this correctly. Keith Lakanen, you should be getting prompted to unmute yourself if you'll do that at this time. I see you've unmuted, sir. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Keith Lockinen. I'm with Audubon, Florida. I'm the director of Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary, and I just want to welcome the new board members to the Big Cypress Basin and also congratulate some of you on your reappointments. I also just want to take this moment to thank you for the longstanding partnership we have, working so closely with the Big Cypress Basin on the leadership of Lisa and Charlotte. And we just definitely appreciate the opportunities to continue to work with you. And we're really excited to hear a presentation coming up here shortly. So thank you.
Thank you, Keith.
That remains our only speaker.
Okay, great. We got a
Whip.
comment.
Andy Wells Bean, Audubon, Western Everglades.
Hi there. My name is Andy Wells Bean. I'm the new executive director of Audubon Western Everglades. Just wanted to pop up here and say thank you for all of your work and to introduce myself. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here today.
Appreciate it.
And that is all.
Okay, all right, great. Then that takes us to our first item for our discussion agenda today, which is the Conservancy of Southwest Florida filter marsh expansion for improved water quality. And we'll kick this off with Sean Murphy to introduce this item.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, returning board members, and new board members. Welcome. I'd like to formally introduce myself. I'm Sean Murphy. I'm a water manager for the South Florida Water Management District at the Big Cypress Basin. Today, I'm pleased to present a brief introduction and overview of our collaborative effort between the Basin and the Conservancy of Southwest Florida with the filter marsh expansion project. The Big Cypress Basin strategic plan details our mission at the basin and provides us with a roadmap for how we allocate our resources and determine our program objectives. Our program objectives include projects that are focused on water quality and ecosystem restoration. The Big Cypress Basin has previously partnered with local government, nonprofits, and other entities to carry out projects that align with our core mission. Previous and ongoing projects, just to mention a few, include septic to sewer conversions, willow removal, and oyster habitat restoration. The filter marsh expansion project was selected based on our program objective for improving water quality in the Big Cypress Basin. The Big Cypress Basin Board approved funding for 2 phases of the project for a combined total of $196,200, or 40% of the eligible construction costs. In February of 2020, the board approved $150,000 for phase one. Phase one included a 63% increase to the expansion of the filter marsh area, an extension of the littoral shelf, and an increase to the wet detention area. In November of 2020, the board approved funding for phase two, which was $46,200. Phase two of the project included 1 year of water quality monitoring post-construction, a final water quality report for the findings of the project, and a final presentation given to the board today. The project results will be discussed in detail in the Conservancy's presentation, but the overall goals were to increase the stormwater treatment capacity, expand the existing filter marsh, increase the uptake of nutrients, and improve the water quality of the runoff going into the Gordon River and ultimately Naples Bay. Before I turn it over to the presentation of the Conservancy, are there any questions regarding the program or project overview?
Are there any questions for Sean? Okay,
Chair, I'd like to turn it over to Rob Mohair at the Conservancy to present on the filter marsh expansion project. Thank you.
thank you, Sean.
Good morning. Just want to thank Chairwoman Roman, the board members that have been reappointed and elected here to serve our incredibly important district, and to Administrator Keeler and to the staff of the Big Cypress Basin. It's always amazing to work with you and be creative and get the job done. And I think through a hurricane and a few ups and downs, we got this done, and it wasn't easy, but we persevered. I just want to give a few introductory comments. I'm really going to turn it over to the expert on the project, Kathy Worley, our Director of Science here, who's going to go into some of the results. But really, it is an honor for the Conservancy to partner with you all to pursue this mission. And just so you understand, your grant investment was part of a $15 million investment we recently just completed into the Nature Center. That included a new dormitory that the kids just moved in 2 weeks ago. That means these are young conservation leaders of the future that now reside on site and spend 9 to 12 months at the Conservancy being educated with real world life experiences in the areas of wildlife rehabilitation, water quality, advocacy, and education and scientific research. So you're part of a very substantial investment that we have made to the community and for the benefit of education and sustainability. We were also really honored to host very recently the South Florida Water Management District Governing Board meeting at the Conservancy, of which I think almost all of you were there. It was a lot of fun. It was hot, but some really great things happened at that meeting. And it's just another expression of our support and partnership working with Collier County and with the district and all the folks at the district and their efforts. So the goal of the Nature Center, I think most of you are pretty familiar with it, but it's not only are we an education center, but that center demonstrates the best practices for sustainability to others that are building and considering developing in the area. So this project is so important, not just because of the water quality elements, but I wish you could see the smiles on the faces of the school children as they go through that new littoral shelf and they're immersed in water and they're understanding in real world terms what it means to be a scientist wading through water, to basically do some net seining and look at the exotic fish that are in that system, to look at the native fish that are in that system. So not only are you creating an ecological benefit, but you have basically expanded the educational platform to all of our students here in Collier County and Southwest Florida. And so it's a tremendous investment. It's available for everyone to see. We're closed in the month of September, but starting October 1st, the Nature Center reopens and proudly will feature the expanded filter marsh as part of that experience. So not only is the system working to benefit our water and our ecosystems, but the system also helps educate others and shows, best practices in action at a scale that people can understand. Sometimes it's hard to show the expansiveness of Everglades restoration, right? Sometimes you have to get an airplane or helicopters, but right here at the Nature Center, through your investment, we can demonstrate some of those BMPs, the best management practices that can be emulated and repeated in other projects throughout the region here. So it's sort of an exciting opportunity to be a very visible expression of what can be done to make our water quality better and to improve habitat and all those other great benefits. Last but not least, just an invitation to all of you. The Conservancy is going to be proudly hosting the 39th Annual Everglades Coalition Conference this year at the Hyatt. in Estero, and that's going to be January 25th, 27th. I know all of you always play a very important role on that, but the Conservancy is proud to be hosting it this year right here in Southwest Florida. And another great opportunity to talk about our Western Everglades projects, to showcase the incredible work that the Big Cypress Basin and everyone else has done to showcase to the broader Florida and national community why those tax dollar investments are really paying great dividends for Southwest Florida and for Florida as a whole, and of course the Everglades. So hope to see you all there. Without that, I think I'll turn it over to Kathy Worley, our Director of Science, and thank you again for having us.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, it is still morning. I'm going to try to keep this brief, and I'll try, because as my boss, Rob, can attest to, is I tend to be long-winded. So bear with me if I get a little long-winded here. Now, I'm going to start with a bit of the background, since this project was an expansion of an existing stormwater treatment feature. The original filter marsh came about as a need to reduce stormwater pollutants that were entering the Gordon River, and also to improve conditions to support and restore native aquatic habitat and the wildlife that utilize these systems. Okay, that's not working. Nope. This always happens to me.
There you go.
Okay. All right. In 2008, a ditch bisected the Conservancy's property, and this drained stormwater runoff from Goodlet Frank Road, from adjacent parking lots, the Coastland Mall, and some residential areas to the west. And what the water did was it shot straight through the, if I can get the mouse to get, it was straight through this ditch here, and it would enter the Gordon River. Now, in 2009, we completed the original filter marsh, and what happens is this. If you can see the mouse here, the stormwater enters the ditch adjacent to Goodlet Frank Road. And once the flow enters the Conservancy property here, it goes through a ditch that is actually a little oxbow, which slows the water down. And that is really important. You've got to slow the water down. And the reason is if you have a planted edges of the ditch, they need to have the water slow enough so that you can absorb nutrients into them. If it's going too fast, it just rips right by them and the nutrients go with them. So the stormwater then encounters a caprock feature, which you could kind of see here. And also there's one here which forces the water this way. So the water is going from the ditch into a wet detention pond. And once it's in the wet detention pond, the pollutants and particulates from the water column, they settle out through sedimentation processes, and they settle to the bottom, taking some of those nutrients and pollutants out of the flow that eventually discharges into the Gordon River. Now, the stormwater then, when the volume gets high enough, it goes through another check dam and goes into a shallow filter marsh system here. And this is where a lot of the plants were uptaking the nutrients. And then, of course, it goes right back out into the Gordon River. Now, monitoring at this time, back in 2009, suggested that the installation reduced nutrient loading by around 16%. And this is actually good for a system that is this size. And from a construction standpoint, the installation of the original wet detention and filter marsh achieved its goal of slowing down the water, increasing the water retention time and the ability to get nutrients out of the water. However, following Hurricane Irma in 2017, the volume of stormwater runoff increased dramatically. And this was in part due to the county's efforts and others to combat residential and commercial flooding that occurred during storms. They wanted to get the water off of the roads and areas where the residents were faster. So what they did was they widened a lot of the stormwater conveyances, the ditches that ultimately enter the conservancy's area and the conservancy's ditch. So what we have now is an increased volume of water entering the ditch that the filter marsh, the original one, was not designed to handle. And so it exceeded the capacity, particularly during rain events. And the treatment train that was in place with the, the oxbows and the wet detention and the filter marsh were no longer being able to function efficiently because it was overloaded. The system was overloaded. So in 2019, the district allotted funding to regional partners for stormwater treatment and management. And the Conservancy's filter marsh fit the bill. Now, it was briefly already, I'm just going to be brief on this particular slide. The objective, because was already gone over so nicely by Sean here. So I'll just kind of slide over that a little bit, but it was to help offset the loss of capacity, basically, that occurred from the increased stormwater flow entering the entire system. So our targeted outcomes included improved stormwater treatment capacity and increasing the wetland species diversity and biological productivity. So we built upon the existing best management practices that were already in place. And we took advantage of these specific pollutant removal capabilities that these practices have by increasing the treatment area around, which is right through here. All of this was improved or increased, and that was about 62%. Now, this photo was taken during the groundbreaking in November 2020. And this is, you can see when COVID was a little still rampant, the masking was still in place for everybody. And left to right was Lisa Keeler, Charlotte Roman, and my boss, Rob Moher. Now, the first thing we did was we put in a box culvert. And you can see in the pictures from left to right, the existing ditch, the box culvert coming in, and the finished product. And you can also see how we have riprap along the sides. We're vegetated along the sides also to help prevent erosion, which also can increase pollutants into the system. We're trying to keep them out. And so when you put in riprap and planted sides at the entrances and exits of the box culvert, you're helping to reduce some of that sedimentation. Now, this is the wet detention area. And you can see on the picture on the left, this is the area that was entirely cleared out that will become the new filter marsh and littoral zone. And also, if you look in the center photo, you can see somebody actually starting to plant this area. And you can also see the area, which is this right here, which is the wet detention pond. And that was actually deepened and also extended this way. And this is a picture of the finished product in the early stages. Now, if you go over there now, you'll see a lush vegetation area that is completely vegetated over. And so it's definitely was a success in the construction did work on there. The project both widened and deepened the wet detention area and added a new filter marsh and a new littoral zone to the BMP treatment plan that already existed. Now, we did establish some water quality and hydrologic monitoring stations that we monitored for a year. And the stations were located from, if you go from left to right here or west to east, in this case, you have the ditch station, and this is where the water enters our property from Goodlet Frank Road. And then you have the new box culvert, the wet detention area, and we have a station in the wet detention pond, kind of mid-treatment train. And we also have a station down here at the outflow of the ditch. And this is outflow on an outgoing tide. And that's kind of important because the area has a complicated mix of different hydrological inputs. You've got fresh water coming from the west at the ditch end here, ditch end down here. when you get heavy rains and stormwater and all the runoff is coming through here, it's more of a freshwater input. Whereas over here at the ditch, you've got brackish water coming in that is tidal from the Gulf, because this is connected to the Gulf. And so you still have a tidal system here. And this makes a complicated mixture of water in this area. And it all depend on which the tidal direction and the hydraulic heads in place, whether you've got stormwater in this filter marsh system or whether you have tidal water in this system. And this can also compound the difficulty in teasing out where pollutants are coming from or going to. Now, this slide shows my one graph. I promise you no more. It shows the water levels over an entire year. And this demonstrates that this whole system is tidal. You have the red oscillating lines, and that is on the westernmost side. That is where the inflow to the stormwater comes in, the farthest from the Gordon River, which it's naturally less. And then you have the blue lines, which are closest to the outflow on an outgoing tide that is closest to the Gordon River. And of course, the wet detention pond is the green, which is somewhere midpoint. But the point of this slide is this whole thing is tidal every day. And so you have to do like when we did our monitoring, we did it on an outgoing tide, trying to take advantage of trying to measure what is actually coming in from the stormwater runoff and going out. So the key takeaways from this are that the stormwater, the amount of time it takes for the stormwater to travel through the whole treatment train, and in other words, the residence time of this water has been increased by putting in by this expansion project. And also the velocity of that water was significantly decreased within this constructed wetland. And this has the effect of reducing the discharge weight, at least on an outgoing tide, and the expanded wet detention area increased the residence time of the stormwater that enters the system, allowing those particulates to settle out once again. And it also increased the pollutant assimilation by plants, because we've increased the filter marsh area. We've added a whole new one. And you've got that newly planted littoral zone in front of the filter marsh area that also takes up nutrients. And this had the effect, all this expansion and construction of wetlands had the effect of counteracting the effects of the increased stormwater that has been entering this ditch since Hurricane Irma in 2017, when they increased those conveyances. So it's basically brought the filter marsh back online, and that the capacity, it can now treat the capacity of water that's coming through there. Now the outflow had lower concentrations of total nitrogen in comparison to the inflow. And there was also the benefit of increased refugia for aquatic species and through the expanded littoral zone. As Rob had mentioned, the filter marsh is part of the Conservancy's Nature Center experience. It's complete with an informational kiosks and that explain the purpose of wet detention ponds and filter marshes and improve and how pollutants improve water quality. And that's so important education. The site serves as a demonstration project, and it illustrates not only the water quality benefits, but the aesthetic benefits of having a filter marsh. And this is provided all through the Conservancy self-guided tours. It provides also a wonderful opportunity for students and guests to get immersed in nature and scientific inquiry. It functions as an outdoor laboratory. One of the programs that is especially popular is called Watery Wonders. And this is a Collier County sponsored public school trip for third graders that occurs every year. And during this program, the students, as Rob told you earlier, learn about the importance of wetlands and filter marshes and water quality. We have a lot of challenges moving forward as we try to prevent flooding in our streets, our neighborhoods, and balancing that with the need to have clean waterways for our economy, our ecosystems, our enjoyment, quality of life. Now, as the pressure increases to prevent flooding, the district alone doesn't have the land or the capacity to treat all the pollutants before they enter our waterways. And particularly during, periods of increased rates and volumes of water or rainfall. So therefore, partnerships like this one, where the district has partnered with the Conservancy in helping to build a stormwater treatment area on Conservancy property, emphasizes the importance of public and private partnerships in the future. Since this project is small in scale, its removal capabilities are logically less than a larger scale project like Freedom Park. However, it has created wetlands in a developed area where land for projects like these is really at a premium. They're very limited. So additionally, the educational opportunities afforded to adults in particular, I think, children, yes, but adults also, because it teaches them a valuable lesson in how to incorporate small scale cleanup efforts in your own neighborhoods. And I think this is particularly important in the future. So I want to thank the district for making this possible, particularly those that work closely on this project, which were Charlotte Roman, Lisa Keeler, and Sean Mayer, who has moved on to greener pastures, I guess, or actually Middle States. So I guess it is greener. Anyway, thank you for your time. I'll take any questions. And if you do have, and I know you received the report. So if you have any specific technical questions, I would be happy to discuss them with you offline and not bore everybody in the room.
Thank you, Kathy, for the excellent presentation and giving us that historical perspective, I think was very, very helpful. We have board questions now. And Ms. Hill?
Thanks, me. Okay, Smith. Yes, thank you for the presentation. It was fantastic. This is probably a newbie question, but do you continue to monitor or like annually, or how often do you monitor?
We monitored for a year to figure out if it was working. And we do a sporadic monitoring because we do use this as an educational area. And we want to make sure that the kids aren't going into areas that they shouldn't be. But other than that, we only try to do that if there is a need.
Okay. And then is this just you coordinate with the county? Do you coordinate with the city too, or is that kind of a separate?
The original project was part of a actually part of the Naples-based swim plan. And it was one of a number of projects that were done together to work together to receive some sort, the benefit of water quality improvements in the Gordon River system. And so ours has a small part of this larger effort by not only the county, but also the district and the city.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Anyone else? Vice Chair Waters?
Yeah, thank you for presentation. Curious, long-term, is there ever a need to come in and harvest some of that plant material and maybe try and get whatever nutrients are in the plant biomass out of there and kind of thin things out? Or is it too young to be even thinking about that at this point?
Oh, we always think about that because yes, there is a maintenance program in place. And it depends on how many storms we get actually, because that determines how much sediment comes into the system. But we do monitor the level of sediment. And when it gets too big, we remove it so that we aren't, keeping that capability there. And we also thin out the plants and remove them once they have become mature, because you're right in that the younger ones do absorb more nutrients. And so they do have to be harvested on a regular basis. This is not a non-maintenance feature, shall we say? But it does do a lot of good and it's worth the maintenance.
Thank you.
Mr. Hill?
Got a few things in mind here. First, on a technical thing, ballpark, what was the amount of percentage of nutrient reduction from coming into the system until upon exit approximately?
It was around 16% that was measured during the original filter marsh,
Okay,
and it's holding its own now that we have gotten the capacity back.
okay. In terms of maintenance, let's go back on that because I'm thinking this may be a surprise to some people, but I'm thinking of about 100 different spots where this could be replicated. And one of the I can anticipate a barrier will be people that are worried about the cost of maintenance of some type of filter marsh in their communities. How big a deal is that? And are there firms that are skilled enough to come in and do the appropriate maintenance like Dana just mentioned?
Yeah, there's a lot of contractors out there that actually go in and have a business just doing this.
Okay,
And if you think about a lot of these, what do you call them? Gated communities, they have all those stormwater features and ponds. Eventually, you have to maintain these. So if you have a filter marsh next to those features, you can remove more nutrients, have less sedimentation, and maybe even less maintenance. It's hard to tell.
okay. And then I'm also thinking, how does a system handle extreme events in terms of the water flow when we have hurricanes and there's water everywhere? Would the filter marsh prevent the water from getting off of people's yards and allow, what's your experience been with so far?
Well, we went through Hurricane Ian and we had storm surge at the Conservancy.
That's right. You had a little
The
bit.
whole area flooded. Now, in this case, there's nothing that can be done when it's that high.
Right.
It's just going to come in and it's going to go out. But it didn't destroy that filter marsh. And that was the most important thing, is one of the first, kind of things I looked at once the water receded. And we didn't even actually have to do any maintenance to it, except for cleaning up the trash, which was, substantial, but, and taking out down trees and things like that. But as far as reducing the water to neighborhoods and things like that, I don't know.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Rob.
I have a couple of questions for you. I'd like to understand better about the fact that the filter marsh works like a tidal system, or the tidal system brings water into the filter marsh. How does that affect? I know you touched on it briefly in your presentation, but what are you seeing in terms of how it affects the organisms and the creatures that live in that filter marsh?
Well, it's basically a stratified system, because the water that goes in there is pretty much brackish. It's not full salt. And because you do have all the runoff too from the Gordon River that's coming down that mixes with that tidal water, and all of that kind of comes up into these tributaries, which are Conservancy as one of them. And basically the tidal, as far as the species that live in there, they're tolerant to changing salinities, but they're primarily a brackish community. We even have a snook nursery there, which is kind of exciting.
I know, to quote Rob, just a few years ago, I think I visited over there at the Conservancy, and he said, if you can understand the filter marsh, you can understand the Everglades. And he does a great job helping decision makers understand how that works. And you did an excellent job today. And I know that when the governing board meeting was hosted by the Conservancy, one of the side visits was to visit the filter marsh, to take a visit to the filter marsh. And the comments were incredible. People were just really excited about what they learned about going to the filter marsh, and it's there available for us to visit anytime we want to, and to learn about it, especially with the brand new Discovery Center that's so special as well. So I think that there's an opportunity there to continue that education. Let's go to public comment. Troy, is there any public comment?
I have no cards, and let me be patient here. Wait a second. No hands raised.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for the great partnership. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for the partnership. We couldn't have done it without you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the proposed 16th Street Northeast Bridge variance, and that'll be with Mr. Rich Virgil.
Good morning, board members. It's nice to see a full board here at the Basin. My name's Rich Virgil. I am the Field Operations Division Director for the district, so I have responsibility for all 8 field stations as well as the right-of-way department, which includes the permitting section and the compliance piece of it as well. So today I'm bringing to you the request from Collier County for a right-of-way permit to construct a 2-lane bridge over the Golden Gate Main Canal on 16th Street Northeast. The bridge, as proposed, should have benefit to the community in shortening emergency response time, providing quicker evacuations as needed, and also just shortening people's commute within the area. So within the district's right-of-way criteria manual for the right-of-way department, basically what we require is a 4-foot vertical minimum distance from the design high water of the canal to the low member of the bridge. And I'll get into why that's needed a little bit later. So the county at this time is requesting a waiver for that criteria. They're proposing a vertical clearance of 2.3 feet on this bridge, which requires the 1.7 foot waiver or variance. So this is a cross section of the proposed crossing, and it depicts the different areas here that you can see on the left side shows the 2.3 feet, and it is measured to the actual lowest point of the bridge. Over on the right, you can see the measurement for the 4 feet of where that would be. You can also see that the bridge has some curvature to it. And at the center of the bridge, the variance would be even less, but it is measured from the low member of the bridge. So for a waiver to be issued, the applicant is supposed to demonstrate to the district a hardship that prevents the compliance with the criteria. The county is asserting that the bridge elevation to raise it the additional 2 feet to meet the criteria would require reconstruction of the roadway 16th Street Northeast for about 260 feet each side of the bridge crossing. And in doing so, if we were to raise it to the full 4 feet, you'd have a lot of negative impacts in the neighborhood. To tie in these driveways on each side of the roadway, you can imagine if you had a boat with a trailer or other large vehicles trying to travel from the higher road down into your driveway, you could easily have issues with bottoming out. There's also swale drainage in this area with culverts underneath the driveways. This would also have to all be retied back in from the higher road, have a potential for steeper side slopes on the shoulder. And also there could be vertical sight distance down the road obstructed with a higher road elevation. So the vertical clearance, why is it required? Well, it's required mainly for maintenance of the canal system. To perform routine and emergency maintenance within the canals. In this location, the field operations group has really determined that this small variance or waiver isn't really going to impact our ability to do our work. The picture here shows one of the pieces of equipment that we use to clean the canals. This is our truckster boat. It's a little larger than some of the other equipment. And it cuts vegetation and pulls vegetation out. We also have a smaller boat called a convert boat, which also would be able to reach underneath this new bridge and clean what it needs to do. It's a much lower profile piece of equipment. But so in order to mitigate this, the county is going to construct for us a new maintenance access point on the west side of the bridge. We currently have one on the east side of the bridge, proposed bridge locations for entering the canal. And then the county will come in and build us one on the west side at a future time. It'll go through permitting with the right-of-way department and meet all our requirements at that time. You can see from the picture here, this is kind of a standard maintenance access point that's exists now on the Cocoa Canal, shows a hardened surface for backing a trailer down with a boat to access the water. So once you guys give us a nod here today, hopefully, we'll be taking this back to the board in West Palm Beach for September, and it'll get approved there, and we'll issue the permit for the county, and we'll move forward with the project. Have any questions?
Thank you, Rich. Are there any questions for Rich by the board members? Okay, what we're going to be doing is I'm going to do a roll call for each board member for Rich to make sure that you don't have any objections to this item. Let me check first to see if there's any public comment. Troy?
We have no public comment at this time.
Okay, great. Then what I'll do is I'll pull each board member, and if you have no objections to this moving forward, just say that you have none. We'll go ahead and start with Ms. Smith.
No objection.
Okay, Mr. Hill,
No objection.
Mr. Romano,
No objection.
Vice Chair Waters,
No objection.
Ms. McLeod,
No objection.
and I have no objection. So you've got your direction there, Rich.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I look forward to working with all of you in the future. Have a great day.
Thank you, Rich. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the Basin Modeling Program overview, and this is going to be by Brad Jackson, and he's going to be joining us remotely today. Go ahead, Brad.
Okay, good morning. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Very good. So good morning, Madam Chair, board members. I wish I could be there in person today, but Zoom will have to work for today. I'm glad we have the ability to do this. And I'll be discussing the kind of the Basin Modeling Program overview for you today. And this is really how it relates to what we're doing at the service center and how this really ties into the Big Cypress Basin strategic plan, and how our program has so many different facets that it looks at between, capital program support, the restoration of water resources, and really the flood control and the day-to-day operations. So I'm going to kind of go over a handful of projects in each one of these categories and kind of give you a brief overview. This presentation is not really a results, modeling results yet. This is really just a kind of a high-level look of the overall program. Next slide, please. So I'll start with probably our biggest project and one of our more important ones here. This is our BCB Regional Watershed Model Update. And this has been ongoing for at least 3 years and probably has some time in front of that when we started, thinking about it, needing to work on it by working with Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary and some of the issues they've been having. But generally speaking, this project has our project manager, Kent Fang, is in our service center. So he's been running the project since September of 21 and is circling very closely to get some initial modeling results to the board for another update at your next meeting. It won't be the finalization of everything, but it is looking like we will have some presentation to the board to kind of show some initial results for our October meeting. The final completion of that is scheduled for the winter. And really the reason this thing's so important is we needed a regional tool to not only look at flood control, we needed a tool to look at not just ecosystem restoration or ecology inside the sanctuary, or look at Picayune Strand. We really wanted something that could look at everything, all the way from Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary all the way past US 41 to the south below Picayune Strand. So it really ties everything in together, and it'll give us a great tool that will lead us into the next initiative, which is the next thing coming up for this important program. And that leads me to the Corkscrew Watershed Initiative. And really what once this tool is completed, we'll be looking at we'll be kicking off a 3-year public planning partnership program project. That'll take about 3 years, we're thinking, to really bring all the stakeholders together, not just local environmental folks, but counties, cities, other interested parties, to make sure they all have a seat at the table and can bring in their concerns and their project lists that they'd like to look at, so we can basically get back to the Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary and Bird Rookery, get that area restored back the way it used to be. And we really need everyone to work together, because that's the Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary and Crew watershed is really the headwaters of our system, either Imperial River or Cocohatchee or even Golden Gate, Maine, down to Naples Bay. So it's all interconnected. So I put together, and you saw this at your April meeting, Akeem touched on this rough schedule down here, but really that 3-year project kicks off next year. And we're hopeful that we can pull off some early, easy to do projects, no regret projects early in that 3-year time period. So we can actually start some early implementation of some of the smaller or easily implemented projects. Some of the larger ones that may come out may be a little bit further down the line, such as the Corkscrew headwater improvements around our headwater project, our headwater structures at Cork 2 and Cork 3. We know something will need to be done there. At some point in the future, this project will help identify what those will need to be. Next slide, please. So continuing on, that was our big modeling project, or one of them at least. I wanted to kind of drill down some of the smaller things we do with our tools, our modeling tools that we have in-house. And so one of the things we do is we can run scenarios, can run scenarios in the office, and basically see how we can do things better in order to have a better flood control or hold back more water or whatever the desire is. And then we can identify and evaluate the outcomes. So one of the things that we got here is the Corkscrew Canal operations improvement. And so there's been discussion and a request for a while now to see what we can do operationally at the headwaters with the infrastructure in place today, to see if we can make real change now, rather than waiting for everything, all the models and tools and capital things to be built. So we undertook this and did some scenarios where we changed the operations of our structure at Cork 2. And basically we had some constraints we had to follow. We had to maintain existing flood control levels. We didn't want to have any adverse impact to the people living in the area. Septic systems are nearby. So we didn't want to adversely affect those. We did want to hold more water back during the kind of dry season, which now I'll kind of explain that graph on the graphic on the left. And kind of to orient us here, the big Cork 2, that's our water control structure. And the green shaded area, that's the difference of groundwater between the with project and without project. So that means as it sits today, or with new operational protocols put in place. And it may look like a large area, but I would focus on the scale of the map and the effectiveness. It really does just extend up just north, barely north of where the canal dead ends. And those levels, those colors are really, those aren't huge numbers to see a water surface elevation increase. They're only 1 to 2 inches. So there may be more work we need to do with different operational criteria, or looking at some other features that complement just the operations. So it didn't show a huge impact to the groundwater elevations by just changing the operations at this structure. It doesn't mean we don't implement them. We go ahead and implement these and run these at higher levels now. We've proven the fact that we can maintain flood control as it sits and have a better dry season groundwater, even though it is somewhat minimal. So kind of our next steps for this is to take this and then roll this into the thing I just talked about, which is the Corkscrew Initiative project. All of the operations of Cork 2, 3, all of these things will be looked at as some, when we start getting into the scenarios and actual suite of projects to look at. So next slide, please. So to focus a little bit more on water resources and ecosystem and a little bit of capital here. So I'm going to move to the east, away from Corkscrew and over to the Faka Union region. On the left there, you've got a picture of our Faka Union Canal at the height of dry season. And it doesn't look much like a canal. As it sits right there, you've got four-wheel tracks running through it, not a whole lot of water going on. So, and this is not unusual. It happens during dry times. Even if we have a very dry year, it definitely has a drying effect like this. So it's not out of the ordinary. Even if we have a normal year, the groundwater, the canal water levels fluctuate greatly. And so there's been a lot of questions about this from homeowners in the region, asking if we can, provide more water throughout the wet season, or I'm sorry, the dry season, and really can we try to improve this situation? And so this is an upcoming project that we will use that new tool I spoke to at the very beginning of the presentation. So this will be a next year project, but really the goal here is to see how sensitive the canal and surface water levels are to the structure operations along this inside Faka Union. And then also with that, look at water users in the region. Is there public water supply? Is there, lots of withdrawals, farming and stuff like that in the region, and really see how sensitive it is. So it's really just to trying to understand what may be the cause of this, so we can try to see if there's anything we can do for structure operations to help with that. It may come down to be that there's really no good answer for that, but we wanted to at least be able to answer the question on what's the cause a little bit. And then I'll transition a little bit. Now we've got Upper Faka Union improvements. So this is another upcoming project that we have. And we've got a lot of things in the works and upcoming. So this is one that will support our capital program. And this also kind of all lines up with the dry season operations of Faka Union. All these kind of work together. So in the Upper Faka Union area, there's 3 existing water control structures that are aging, are in need of replacement and or upgrades. And we believe one of them might be completely redundant and be able to get rid of by upgrading another structure. Having less assets and inventory, that's less O&M cost. That's one less thing to fail. That's one less thing we have to worry about if we can get it all done with one control structure. So the first thing we have to do with that is really answer that question through H&H modeling, is understand where we want to put the structures and how do we want to operate them and what are our goals. And so our goals for this would be to increase the hydro period in the region, the depth for wetlands, and increase the aquifer recharge. There's so many critical kind of isolated, almost little wetlands in that region that we really want to keep hydrated as long as possible. And really some of the other goals we have is, we want to improve the flood control. We won't necessarily make it 100%, 100-year flood event, but if we can improve it, we want to do that and improve our operational flexibility with all the remote control that we've been heavily investing in for the last 20 years. Definitely will help us do that. So, and again, more of this will be upcoming next year. So this is just kind of a sneak peek on what's coming. Next slide, please. So more capital program support here. This is I-75 weir replacement. So to orient us here, we are at Pine Ridge Road and I-75, and we've got an existing water control structure just north of Pine Ridge next to the hospital. And it is a manually operated gated structure, and it is O&M heavy to operate that. It maybe not this year since we're so dry, but most years it's definitely O&M heavy on operations, and it lacks a lot of drawdown capability to lower water levels ahead of a storm quickly. And it does lack a little bit in dry season water level increase. So we'd like to be able to hold water levels higher north of this if possible. So really what the modeling project will do here, that's part of the capital program here. We recommended a new location for the weir and where it's going to go, and the new proposed location conceptually right now is to move that south to Napa Way Boulevard on the left there. You can see it towards the bottom of the screen on the left. And that's our new location of it, but all of the operations of it, the size of it, how it's going to be operated, do we put in water conservation pumps in there so we can move water from downstream to upstream to stop water moving out of the system when we have a need upstream of here. All of those questions have to be answered by our modeling tool and our modeling team. So that's what really this project will answer. And then once all those answers are put together and a final report and accepted, then we'll start moving forward with the actual structure design. But again, more of how we're just engaged with all the different facets of what's going on inside the Basin works. Next slide, please. So this one is more of a planning project here. This is our GG5 replacement study. And this one's really kind of interesting. There's so much rapid growth in the eastern portions of our community. And this particular structure is situated somewhere between Immokalee Road, where it goes north-south, and Everglades Boulevard. And we know it's historically was built too low, meaning it provided over drainage. It overdrained the area north of it, especially during the dry season. We know it provides limited flood control level of service. It's a manually operated structure. That means the field station has to go out and operate every single time. And we know, since it's growing so quickly out there, that the land where we would want to put a new structure could have a house built on it quickly. And so we wanted to get ahead of that urbanization that's happening out there and really try to figure out the best location to put the structure. And so to do that, we tasked the team to figure out where the best location is to put it, what would be the new size of it, how much room would we need to build, and really what would the operational needs of that structure be? What improvements could we make? And again, you're going to see an overarching theme here. One of our main goals is to maintain flood control, but can we increase groundwater storage and decrease over drainage? So what we've done here, the map on the left, you saw a similar one, just like you did on Cork 2. This is the one for GG5, but the area is much, much larger. It's significantly larger than the changes at Cork 2, and the amount of water that we can save and not discharge out of the system when the system inside and the environment here at GG5 could use the water. So the reds and the blues, that's a foot to over 1.5 feet more of groundwater recharge that's going to be there if we move forward with, or when we move forward with this project. So it's really got a great water conservation concept to it, and it'll be a good project to really accomplish that. So what we've done, we've accelerated this technical report here. So we kind of already checked the box a little bit, saying, okay, here's where we want to put it. We worked with the county to highlight, these are the areas we'd like to put it. And that way we can start looking at real estate considerations as things become available. And it does cut some time off of the future design cost by having some of this work done up front. So all good things there. Can you move on to the next slide, please? So I'll touch briefly on here on some of our this one isn't necessarily a project, the top one, but it is something that we deal with almost daily. And it's the technical and local expertise. Rich was just up talking about the right-of-way permits. And then we also have the ERP permits that the district does. But when those start to interact with the BCB canal systems, how those applications and permits are reviewed, those all come to us to look through to see what does the modeling tell us, what does history tell us. We don't necessarily just look at one model, we look at a different suite of models and period of records to make sure we're giving the best available information to the applicant, to make sure that they're going to build the bridge at the right height, or make sure that it can discharge at the right spot with the right amount of flow and all of that. So we also provide some of that same assistance to Collier County as they request on some of the secondary systems, since their parts of their secondary system do lie within our level of service model. So we do work closely with our Collier County partners on that as well when the need arises. Finally, here on this one, the Canal Improvement Program. So the level of service study that I just mentioned, it kind of highlighted a few areas where there may be choke points or opportunities to expand the canals. And really what we're doing to support the canal improvement program, whether it's either through capital or to help the field station, figure out how far down they need to dig to restore a canal section to get back to design. All of that comes from our modeling and from the engineering documents. So really, we provide those kind of parameters for those types of improvements, and then we kind of provide a roadmap on which one should come first, because they either have the most critical area or maybe some low-hanging fruit we could do fairly quickly. I've listed some examples here. Cypress, I-75 are some of the ones coming up now. Next slide, please. So this is my last couple slides here, and I really wanted to spend a little bit of time here. This is a project that we are undertaking at the service center. And we really wanted to figure out how can we best highlight all of the capital improvements that the basin's made over the last 20, 25 years. And how can we make a presentation to that? How could we inform the public? How can we inform the board of all the great things that we've done over the last 25 years with upgrading our system? We talk about replacing a water control structure here or there, and that sounds great, but we wanted to put them all together in one thing and really see what that does. So to do that, we got a little bit of background here, not to spend too much time on this, but the original structures and canals were built, before the basin existed. Some of them, were back in the 1960s, and they were inherited from developers. And they have extremely limited flood drawdown capabilities. And a lot of the elevations were set too low in places, which really contributed to some of the over drainage that let us develop here, but it did maybe contribute to the over drainage of the region, which we can now undo some of that by having more resilient and more robust water control structures strategically placed through the system. But over the last 25 years or so, we replaced almost 20 water control structures. We've either upgraded them or replaced them. And that's taken our flood control response time from many hours or longer to go out and go change a gate or whatever to minutes. So that definitely changes things. And it's also significantly reduced the over drainage of fresh water out of the system. Like I keep my overarching theme here, how much fresh water can you keep in the system while maintaining that flood protection level of service? And so one of the ways we're going to do that is, next slide, please. It is really to compare two different models that we're doing. And so we've got our current model that's being under development now, and then we're going to rewind back in time. We're creating a historical H&H model. It's going to be a historic model. It's going to basically look like, what did the system look like in 2000 with all of the old water control structures? You can see an example on the page there of what the COCO 1 used to look like, and now what it looks like today. So there's a big difference there in how frequently that gets operated and everything. So that project to recreate an old model from 25 years ago is definitely a challenge and a time-consuming project to come up and go research old maps, plats and operational rules and regulations and all of that. So we've been hard at work on that for the last 6, 8, 9 months. And we do hope to have a presentation come to the board next year with some of the results for this. And really the way we were thinking about demonstrating this is really to produce some of these groundwater difference maps similar to what I produced on the GG5 structure. I think that really visualizes how much more groundwater can be saved and not sent to tide when it doesn't need to be. And then basically you can show how much flow does not leave out of Golden Gate number 1 that that gets into Naples Bay. And that's water that Naples Bay doesn't necessarily need. And if we can balance those things, that's fantastic. So we want to produce some maps and really help educate and show how much our capital program is really helping this community with flood control, but also for water conservation and everything like that. Next slide, please. So that's not necessarily 100% of everything that we're doing, but that's definitely the program overview. I'll close here and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Brad. And that was an excellent overview of the entire process of modeling that you've got going on. No wonder you're so busy. That really paints the picture much more clearly. I appreciate it. Are there any board questions or comments for Brad?
I got a few hundred, but I'll cut it down to just a few, Brad. On the modeling of Corkscrew Swamp and other areas, can you, I assume Akeem, maybe if he'll let you get on the high powered computer, can you model some pretty extreme circumstances like similar to what we're dealing with this year, where we have 48% of mean rainfall for July? Can you put in some pretty bizarre controls and see what the output is?
Yeah, I mean, in short, the answer is yes. The model simulation period that we're starting with, it's a 10-year period of record. So we basically go from 2010 to 2020 and all of the years in between. So we're going to capture some dry years. We're going to catch 2017. We're going to catch, a large variation of rainfall. If there's not a specific one, if there's not one that meets the drought indicator that we're worried about, we could do something else with it by changing the rainfall patterns and redoing it. That's definitely something that we looked at. Yes.
Okay. And then moving on to the Paca Union Gold Canal near Golden Gate, that slide. I'm just wondering, is there any way to apply some of the filter marsh techniques, maybe adding some riprap, maybe creating some ponds, maybe adding some curves to slow the water flow so we have some storage of the water? At the same time, I'm thinking of how to make a nice little ecosystem at the other, and balancing that with not inviting an opportunity for people to get stuck in the mud. And then Lisa's got to deal with an issue. How do we balance safety and not creating a potential situation?
So sure, the canals, their main function is to convey water during the large storm event, and the water treatment that really, to do that, I think it might be best to look at an offline type scenario where you could pull water out of the canal into a filter marsh or something, just like Kathy's, the Conservancy's thing just did. It took it out of a ditch, routed it around, and put it back in. You could look at doing something like that to treat the water in Paca Union, but it would be very difficult to establish a water quality feature inside the banks of the canal as it sits today.
Got it. Thank you.
And I think the key there, Andy, is having enough water in that canal, because you saw the picture and it's pretty dry.
I was thinking if you put some riprap across it, maybe just 6 inches or so to slow the flow, that'll maybe I'll have some treatment effect, and probably be relatively minor. But on the other hand, too, if you create that, then we're gonna have kids trying to walk across the canal on the rocks, and then they slip, and then Lisa gets a call.
Yes. It's good. Other board questions or comments for Brad? Brad, I have a couple questions. First of all, I thought that the model that you showed for GG5 was really excellent to show how your tools that you put in place helped with those water levels. My question has to do with Cork 2. Those groundwater elevations, just by the change of management or operations, we didn't get as big of effect as we thought we might get. What other tools, can you just explain some of the tools, not necessarily solving that issue right now, but what are some of the tools that you have at your disposal to try to work with increasing those groundwater levels?
So one thing that I failed to touch on, and I meant to, was on that Cork 2 area. We know that was with our old modeling tool. We know after working with the sanctuary, with crew, that maybe there's a larger area of impact that our current tool doesn't pick up. And so that's one of the reasons we want to then take those operational changes and apply that to the new tool that's being developed now, to see if there's a better connection and see if there really is a larger impact, and maybe the tool doesn't necessarily show it correctly as it sits today. But as far as operations and other things we could do, as it sits today, it would be difficult to speculate at what that could be. We've tried operations at both Cork 3 and Cork 2 to do something. And really without getting, we don't want to necessarily have any unintended consequences either by moving too much further upstream in the bird rookery area by doing something up there without having the tool complete and to see what type of regional effect that would be. But there may be some additional monitoring that we could do in certain areas to really fine tune exactly what's going on there. There seems to be a trend of groundwater movement from Cork 2 all the way to the sanctuary. So there's still more to learn going on there, and maybe some additional monitoring is something that we could do for that.
Well, that was an important clarification on the fact that it was based on an old tool versus the new tool that you're working on now. So I think that's an important clarification, and I appreciate that. Okay, public speakers.
We have one hand raised on Zoom at this point. Brad Cornell. Mr. Cornell, you're being prompted to unmute yourself. You've done that, sir. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and board members. This is Brad Cornell, and I'm the policy staff for Audubon, Florida, and its Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary, as well as Audubon Western Everglades. And I appreciate the opportunity to address you today. And I also want to extend my congratulations and welcome to the new board members and for the reappointments of the two continuing board members. I want to start by just saying we fully support this modeling initiative, and including the Corkscrew Watershed Initiative that is going to be one of the objectives of the use of this new large Big Cypress Basin model. We also want to encourage the Big Cypress Basin and the district to continue to examine some of the unique hydrogeologic features that are north of the Corkscrew Canal that may be key to restoration opportunities. And it's kind of related to this question, Madam Chair, that you just raised with Brad Jackson of what are the reasons for not seeing the same sorts of groundwater responses in operational changes at Cork 2. We believe there are other, as you have just discussed, there are other things to investigate, including hydrogeologic features that are important to consider. We also look forward to helping identify projects that are low-hanging fruit that we can get off the ground very early on in the project timeline. And Brad Jackson noted that objective, and some of those might even be earlier than 2026, as he showed in the timeline. And an example of that might be, for instance, down Shady Hollow Boulevard, one of the constraints that Brad noted was trying to keep septic systems from being flooded. Well, if we could shift those septic systems to central water and sewer, or at least central sewer systems, and work with the county on that, that might help alleviate some of that constraint to allow us to raise water levels even higher. And another thing I just wanted to flag was looking at the picture of the FACA Union and recognizing the over drainage impacts to Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary and Golden Gate Estates generally. This is in the dry season, this is a significant catastrophic wildfire risk. And I think we all have recognized that, but it's an extra motivation. It's the flip side to the concern over flooding. We don't want to invite wildfire risk as a response to over drainage in our seeking flood protection. So thank you for this continued collaboration to solve the serious over drainage threat to the ecological integrity of Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary, and also for the wider Corkscrew Regional Ecosystem Watershed. We really appreciate that collaboration, and we look forward to that being continued. Thanks.
Thank you, Brad, for your participation today. Are there any other public speakers?
No, there are not, ma'am.
Okay, that brings us to cupcakes. For the new board members, you might not be aware of this, but this board enjoys more cupcakes than any other board probably in Collier County. We're usually celebrating a birthday, but today we're celebrating you. So we're celebrating your new membership to the board and the reappointment of our returning board members. So we're going to take a 10-minute break and we're going to reconvene at 12:35. So with that, let's take our break and have some cupcakes. Thank you.
Madam Chair, you have a live mic.
Okay, let's reconvene our meeting and begin with the fiscal year 2023-2024 budget presentation with Ms. Candy Heater.
Thank you, Madam Chair, fellow board members. It's a pleasure, as always, standing before you and being able to present to you your budget, and especially this milestone, which sums up all the hard work and dedication of staff and direction from you as a board. So the presentation today, we will speak on the Basin millage rate, revenues and expenses, highlights, and then at the very end, I will be requesting 2 motions for approval, so 2 resolutions for approval. Moving on to the millage, the fiscal year 23-24 proposed millage rate is 0.0978 mils. That is $9.78 per $100,000 of taxable value. A homeowner in Collier County with an average home valued at $500,000 would pay an estimated $48.90 for the year. Some of the services that $48.90 pays for is flood protection, capital investments in infrastructure, maintenance and vegetation removal, water supply, land management activities, restoration, and modeling for sea level rise and ecosystem restoration. The fiscal year 23-24 budget before you today is $15,124,815. The revenues to the left, the 86% of those revenues is from ad valorem taxes, $12,975,058. You do have some additional revenues that staff projects for you to help cover your recurring budget. Those are investment income at $60,000, right-of-way and permit fees, scrap metal, and service center lease. You do have some fund balance that we do budget each year, and that is for your emergency reserves. To the right, the expenditures, the 2 largest being flood control operations and capital projects. Additionally, your reserves, as I had mentioned earlier, and then a suite of other categories such as land stewardship for crew, modeling, the service center and facilities staff's budget, and then some water quality projects. So moving on to some of the highlights and who is responsible for accomplishing your work plan for you beginning October 1 through September 30th of 2024. Administrative services and executive offices at $187,000. That includes the general services staff over on the East Coast and facilities, who's responsible for the service center maintenance, and some staff at district headquarters control room that works with your staff here at the Big Cypress Basin to provide water management oversight. Big Cypress Basin staff at $2.6 million. The responsibility in their work plan would be to administer the water quality projects, canal restoration improvement for Faki Union Canal, enhanced monitoring corkscrew headwaters, outreach communication, water management, as I had earlier mentioned, and some modeling support. Engineering and construction division and modeling division at $5.2 million. A suite of projects that are planned for your work plan of October 1 to September 30th includes the Big Cypress Basin Communications Systems Improvements Tower. There's $2 million in the budget planned for that. Canal improvements based on level of service study. There's about $700,000 for that. SCADA additions and replacements, $500,000. The I-75 weir replacement design, about $400,000. Corkscrew canal headwater improvements, $350,000. And structure inspection program at about $250,000. Modeling efforts as well for the Basin Regional Watershed Model Update, and Corkscrew Swamp Modeling. Your Field Station Operations and Land Management Division, which includes the Big Cypress Basin Field Station and Land Management Team on the East Coast at 4.4 million. They're responsible for managing all of the water control structures, providing flood control, as well as the land management activities for Collier County portion of CREW. Information Technology at $263,000. That includes the SCADA team on the East Coast that provides SCADA system and telemetry base station maintenance. And then the Basin Board meeting support, as well as IT support for your staff. Reserves, debt, fees, and charges at $2.3 million. That includes your $2 million emergency reserves, about $230,000 for property appraiser fees, tax collector fees at $114,000, and then some self-insurance funds, because the district is self-insured, that covers workers' compensation, general liability, and auto liability, and that's $50,000 that's been set aside out of the Basin funds. So moving on to the next steps after this meeting, we do have 2 meetings at the district headquarters, which will be September 14th and September 26th. There will be 2 public hearings at 5:15 to further discuss the millage, tentative budget, and final millage and final budget, of which the Basin's millage and budget will be included in both meetings. So the first motion to request for approval is BCBB 2023-0801, which is a resolution of the Big Cypress Basin Board of the South Florida Water Management District approving the submittal of the millage rate 0.0978 mils for the fiscal year 23-24, requesting the governing board of South Florida Water Management District to levy ad valorem taxes within the Big Cypress Basin.
Okay, thank you, Candy. We'll take these one at a time. Is there any board comment? Okay, is there any public comment, Troy?
We have no public comment at this time.
Okay, then I'll entertain a motion and a second to approve resolution BCBB 2023-0801.
Make a motion to approve.
A second.
Okay, motion by Vice Chair Waters, a second by Ms. Smith. We'll go ahead and do a roll call vote for this. Vice Chair Waters,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. Romano,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Ms. McLeod,
Yes.
and I vote yes. That passes unanimously.
Thank you. Moving to the next resolution and final resolution, BCBB 2023-0802, a resolution of the Big Cypress Basin Board of the South Florida Water Management District submitting the fiscal year 2023-2024 basin budget in the amount of $15,124,815 to the governing board of the South Florida Water Management District for inclusion in the district budget.
Is there any board comment on this motion? Is there any public comment?
We have no public comment.
Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion for this resolution.
Make a motion to approve.
Motion by Vice Chair Waters. Is there a second?
Second that.
Okay, Mr. Romano seconds. I'll conduct a roll call vote. Vice Chair Waters,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. Romano,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Ms. McLeod,
Yes.
and I vote yes. That passes unanimously. Thank you, Candy. And before you go, Candy, I'd like you to ask Julie Maytalk to please come forward and introduce her to the board.
Thank you. It'd be my pleasure. Julie?
Madam Chair, board members, I just wanted to say thank you all for your support on the budget this year. We appreciate it, and the budget staff appreciate your support and guidance.
Well, Julie, I asked Candy to bring you forward to thank you and the outstanding work that you provide to the basin. It's just been incredible 4.5 years that I've been serving, and I'm sure going forward with the new board members that you'll continue to provide that excellent support. And I just wanted to thank you publicly for all you do. And of course, Candy too, but I know who's working behind the scenes on a lot of these important aspects of our budget. So thank you so much. Thank you, Candy. Okay, that brings us to our board comment. And this is the time that we can share with each other as members of the board, since because of the sunshine law, we don't talk outside our meetings about district business. So first of all, I want to say congratulations to everyone. I really feel so proud and so honored to serve with you. This is the first time in 4.5 years that I've had a full Big Cypress Basin board. So I want to welcome you and thank you for your willingness to serve. And I look forward to working with you. And I just hope that your participation in this board is as satisfying and as worthwhile as it has been for me. So I want to thank you. And also our returning board members, congratulations. Governor DeSantis appointed and reappointed this board, and it's just terrific that you're all here. And during the board comment, I might suggest, but there's no pressure here, that if you want to make some introductory comments about yourself, that this would be a great time to do it. But of course, there's no requirement to do so. So we'll go ahead and start with Vice Chair Waters, if he has anything for board comment.
No, nothing other than echo what you say. It's nice to have a full board and have additional voices, but thank you.
Okay. Mr. Hill?
Actually, I have a number of things I'd like to talk about. Oh, first thing, I haven't been confirmed by the Senate yet, and I don't know what the betting line is, but I am a little bit nervous.
That's right. All of these appointments and reappointments are pending Senate confirmation.
Oh, first thing on somewhat of a more of an administrative thing, and keep in mind, I have like a gazillion things going on in my head every day. And the mission statement of the Big Cypress Basin Board, when I was preparing for today's meeting, I was on the website, and when I clicked on the mission, it forwarded me off to the district website for the mission statement. And I'm just wondering if we couldn't clarify that. I assume we have a similar mission statement, but we could publicize that either through the agenda or on the agenda or some other way to make sure that we are in line. And I assume that it's pretty much the same thing as, I'll just read it, to safeguard and restore South Florida water resources and ecosystems, protect our communities from flooding, and meet the region's water needs while connecting with the public and stakeholders. I assume that's.
Yeah, and that's a great suggestion, Andy, and we can look at ways to do that. And I'm sure Lisa already took a note. At the governing board chambers, which is the chambers and the headquarters of the South Florida Water Management District, we have it right up here on the edge of a beam that goes across the governing board dais, so we can see it.
Like me.
Yes, so good suggestion. Lisa will come up with some ideas and come back to the board.
Okay. And I have a couple other things. On a less positive note, the mission statement is not of this organization is not to produce a great fishing environment, although I think it should be. That's my personal agenda. And unfortunately, the way I grade the ecosystem is through my success in fishing. And lately it's been pretty horrible this year. There's a number of factors, and yes, it could be a personal issue, but actually in speaking with my friends, many of which are very accomplished fishing guides, it is not a personal issue. It's a issue impacting the Everglades. There's probably numerous factors involved, but what concerns me is in the Western Everglades, there has never been any large encompassing studies of what is going on, no baseline studies in the area. Just so what I'm speaking of, maybe like from Everglades City south to the Shark River. And I have observed a number of things that may be within our boundaries of responsibility. Specifically is the loss of seagrasses. the loss of salt marsh grasses, which is basically about 99% of them that used to be along the fringe all the way from the Chatham River. If you've ever heard of Killing of Mr. Watson of that tale, that's where he used to live, all the way down to Lossman's River. Virtually all of the salt marsh grasses have disappeared. I actually have a great photo from I think 2005 of my wife's nephew catching a fish. In the background was just covered in salt marsh grasses. That area used to be teeming with life. Now it's basically void. I'll be glad to take anybody for a ride through that area, although I think we need to take Derek with us if they're board members, but I'm sure he'll be willing to ride along. But there is a really a major change for the worse that's happening. And I don't think there's any scientific studies being done. I know that's probably out of our area. So anyhow, that's my comment with that. I wish I was more positive, and with all the great work that we heard, it should impact things. So if we didn't do all those things like the Picayune, I can only imagine where things would be. So.
Now, what areas, again, Mr. Hill, were you concerned about the scientific studies? What area?
I would say in the Everglades National Park, which opens up a whole challenge in trying to do scientific work in that area for legal reasons. Specifically, has not been any studies to my knowledge all the way down. Let's take it all the way down to the Shark River, since that's a name that most people are familiar with, and that's where a lot of water outflows go. Interestingly enough, up until the 1950s, clams were a major industry in the area. Gone. And there was never any, again, to the best of my knowledge, there was never any follow-up studies, historical analysis as to why they disappeared. I've heard rumors and various tales, but there's been no hard evidence. And that may have been the beginning of our decline.
I would think some of it would have to do with the hydrology. You know, the Everglades has been altered and, you know, just reconstructed. So that's part of why restoration is so important, is to put those flows back in. So I'll follow up on that and I'll see what I can find out. Okay. Anything else?
I could go on, but I think that's enough for today. I'll save for next.
Okay. All right. Ms. Smith?
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I guess I will do it more of an introduction. So my why and why I'm here and why I even applied is because of my background. I am president-elect for the Naples Area Board of Realtors. I sit on, I'm a board member for Florida Realtors and also National Association of Realtors, which is 1.5 million strong. It's the largest trade organization in the United States. In both Florida Realtors and NAR, I sit on their land use committee, which involves environment, which is water quality is a huge issue, water resources and quality. And I vice chair land use next year for NAR, which is one of 95 committees. So huge honor for me. But this is of most important to, of course, the real estate industry. And as president next year, this is one of my top initiatives is, of course, advocacy, which we work closely with our advocate team in Florida Realtors and also Governor DeSantis, who, of course, with the Everglades funding, we're very involved with that call to actions. We come in droves because it's so important to our area. No quality of water here, a bad quality of water here is a huge impact on our industry. And that's just me personally and also professionally. So I look forward to opportunities to go and share the mission here and the knowledge I learned here with our organization, which is about 8,400 strong. And I don't think they have a clue what the Basin Board does or the 134 miles of canal, what the purpose is, where the water comes from, et cetera. So I look forward to this as more of an educational aspect of my professional life, but hope to add value to this board. But thank you very much. I appreciate it and look forward to the opportunity.
Thank you and welcome. Mr. Romano?
Just want to say thank you for the opportunity to serve and looking forward to learning how the process works. And thank you again.
Welcome. Welcome. It's great to have you. Ms. McLeod?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Hello to my fellow board members. I'm super excited to have been selected to serve on this board and with you all. So I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for allowing me to attend today via Zoom. I'm out of the country, but I look forward to getting back to the States here soon and serving with you all in person. So thank you.
Well, thank you, and we'll welcome you on the day as when you're back in town. So thank you so much for being here today. Okay, that we're going to move on to the technical reports. The first one is the field station activity report with Andrew Wolf.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Wolf. I'm the superintendent at the Big Cypress Basin Field Station. First of all, I say welcome to our new board members. I hope to get you out to the field station for a tour soon. I'll be going over field station operations and what we do at the field station, maintenance activities, and a 3-month outlook. This is our field station, and a picture when it was dedicated in 2016. And right to the left side of it is the Golden Gate Canal. So we're right on one of our canals, which we have a structure right near there. So it's very handy to monitor the canal. But it's a beautiful field station, and we like keeping it that way. And hopefully you'll get a tour soon. Operation maintenance of the primary canals is what our work is. We have 134 miles of canals, 34 water control structures, 16 that are automated, 8 field employees, and 4 administrative employees. We also take care of the comprehensive Everglades restoration project, or Picayune restoration. And we have 3 major pump stations, 1 water control structure, 9 miles of levees, and 8 employees out there. And the 4 administrative employees can work at both the pump station or the Everglades restoration and the field station. So they kind of hop between work. Some of our projects, since the water's been so extremely low, we've removed a lot of debris. This is a green canal. We removed 20 or 18 cubic yards of debris out of the canal about a month and a half ago. But now the water's coming up. So we'll probably be the last time we'll get to see the bottom of the canal and pull out any more garbage over there. We also cleaned out the C1 connector, and on the left-hand picture, you see a specialized piece of equipment that we used from Miami Field Station. It's a long reach trash truck. It can sit up on top of the bank and reach over and pick out any garbage or any tree limbs, anything out of the canal. Our trash truck is a little smaller. It doesn't quite reach down to the bottom. So we borrowed their trash truck, which worked very well. And you can see on the right, we picked out virtually anything out of the canal. We got 25 cubic yards of debris out of the C1 connector. A never-ending seemed like project here is getting the vegetation and debris out of the canals. On the left-hand side is our truck store, which is a specialized piece of equipment that we just purchased about 6 months ago. And it can offload itself on a trailer and go down the canal bank and right into the water, which works great for our limited access to some of our canals. And on the right is Henderson Creek, where we use a long arm track hoe to scoop out the vegetation. One of our big projects was automating Cork 1 structure. On the left side, we had to reconfigure the fenced in area, put up new electrical boxes, conduits, and help SCADA basically get it automated. On the right is the SCADA team from West Palm Beach, and when they were certifying the structure, and now it is fully automated, which is a great help, because if they're a manual structure, we have to come clear from the field station to make any adjustments, and on weekends it could be hours before we get out there. Here we just some general maintenance on a gearbox at I-75 number 2 structure. We take the gearbox off periodically. We take them back to the shop. You see in the right-hand picture, they're tearing apart the gearbox, checking for any worn parts. And the person on the left there is our new employee, Francisco, sorry. And he's learning how to tear apart gearboxes and learning of the procedure. Some of the smaller issues we've dealt with on the left-hand side is back flushing stilling wells. For the new board members, stilling wells are at the upstream and downstream of every structure. And they tell the height of the water. They're very important. And sometimes they'll get clogged up with sand or vegetation. So we back flush the well and usually cleans it out. In the middle, we're just doing preventive maintenance on an air compressor at GG2. And on the right, replacing stem boots at Coco 2. The stem boots cover the stem to keep it out of the weather and so it doesn't corrode, or if it corrodes, it can mess up the gearbox when it goes through it. So the stem boots are very important. And one thing I'm very proud of the team that's shown in these pictures, because not only do they keep our structures in very good condition, but they also work out in 100-degree weather every day and get very few complaints. So I'm very proud of them. A 3-month look ahead, address any bank washouts, remove vegetation from the canals, structure maintenance, continue preventive maintenance. And for structure operations, if we ever get any rain, we'll be adjusting any of the manual structures. Now for the comprehensive Everglades restoration project, you'll see at the top the 3 pictures of our major pump stations. At our Merritt pump station, there was a lot of exotics identified in the spreader basin, which is the discharge side of the pump station. So we did an aerial spray of 55 acres out there. This is a very cost-effective way of controlling the exotics, because if they get out of the spreader basin, they will go out into the forest and cost a lot more to eradicate. Some of the other projects we've worked on, we've completed monthly preventive maintenance, rebuild a cooling water distribution pump at Merritt. And our big project was changing out, putting in a new pump shaft on pump 3 at Merritt Pump Station, which all 3 stations now are at full capacity, ready for when we do get the rain, if we ever do. We also did a tree project on the Miller Canal to give you a little orientation of where it is. The Miller Canal is south of I-75, which is the red line at the top. And it's the blue line that runs down to the Miller Pump Station. The gold area in the center there is the area we did the tree removal on. It's 1.3 miles on each side, and we cleared the top of the bank back 16 feet. The reason we do this is you can see on the left-hand picture, the before picture, all the trees that were over the side of the bank and right on top of the bank are very dangerous for a hurricane or heavy thunderstorm. Can put the trees in the canal and block it up and cause flooding upstream, or go down to the pump station. So on the right-hand side, you see how clear it is. So if trees fall, they will just fall in the bank and won't go into the water. 3-month outlook, respond to wet season pump orders, housekeeping, preventative maintenance. And our biggest project is training 3 new employees on pump station operations. And on a personal note, I've gone off to the pump station. I've seen a lot of wildlife lately, plenty of deer. The center one is an eagle that's out near one of our pump stations. And on the right is a crested caracara. There was a pair of them by the Miller pump station, which is kind of rare for this area down here. And with that, any questions?
Thank you, Andrew. Are there questions for Andrew?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Andrew, with the low water levels, it seems like you're making use of that. It's be able to clear out some things that you wouldn't normally this time of the year. In the Picayune, how often are you pumping relative to what you've done historically?
I think Brad's going to have that in his next presentation.
Okay.
But we're not pumping any diesels right now, just the low flow electrics at Merritt and once in a while at FACA. So we're still way behind.
Okay.
But I think he has a little clearer picture on that.
Yeah, you'll probably make some comment about we may be catching up on Tuesday and Wednesday this coming week.
We may, yes.
So, thank you.
Andrew, I'm hoping that the visit to the field station, are you also coordinating for the new board members to get out to the Picayune Strand and the FACA pump station?
Yeah, we'll set up a tour of wherever they want to go.
Okay, great. Because I think that's important. They can at least see the comprehensive Everglades restoration project in their backyard. And I think that'll be really helpful. And I want to congratulate you on your new employees. I think that's great. Your hard work and your effort to bring new people on the team is paying off. And I want to congratulate you on that. And also thank you and the whole team for your work. I mean, the temps have been brutal out there. It's been so hot, and we all know that it's another 20 degrees hotter any day in the Picayune Strand. So I know that they continue to work regardless of the heat. So thank you for all of your hard work, for you and the entire team.
You're welcome. I'll pass that on to them. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I think that's it. Okay, we've got the water conditions report with Brad Jackson, remote. Brad, are you there?
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm back again. Here to present your water conditions report since our last board meeting back in April. So pleased to be here again. My name is Brad Jackson, the principal engineer and water manager for the region. So we've got a handful of graphs here and technical information. I know we've got some new board members, so I'll spend a little bit of extra time going through the graphs. But generally speaking, there's an overarching trend to my report this month. It may change in the future, but the overarching trend is basically what you see on the screen in front of you, is that for this calendar year, we are well below normal for our rainfall totals. And we really had so far a lackluster wet season. We do have portions of the basin and the West Coast and moderate drought conditions. And definitely have some low rainfall totals. We've got over a foot of rainfall deficit for the year so far. So that's definitely unusual for us. Next slide, please. So on these next few slides, I'll kind of go back in time and catch back up from since our last board meeting. So here, this was the start of the wet season back in May. And what you have on the left, you have pick your favorite watershed. And we put basically the rainfall total for each watershed. So kind of in the middle there, you've got Golden Gate, Maine at 4.1. The coastal basins is the very dark blue. It only got 2.3. It's the big, large one downstream of everything to kind of orient you. So you can kind of look at those. The redder they get, the more rainfall they get. We do the same thing on the right-hand side of the screen. That breaks it up into smaller areas. Those are the radar. So that's basically the gauge adjusted radar. So it really zooms in and lets you know exactly where the rainfall fell. So for example, on May this time around, we had portions of Vaca Union, very small in area, but got upwards of 8 to 10 inches in a very localized location over the course of May. But typically speaking, this May was relatively average. We got basically what we would normally expect to get in May. Next slide, please. So we'll move over to June, and that story changed quickly for us. We normally get about 10 inches of rainfall. This time around, we only got about 6.8 inches on average at our rain gauges. So some of those numbers, some of the areas, the very northern bit of the system, in the Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary, the OK Slough watershed, those areas did get some heavier rainfall this in June, but overall the levels for us are well below normal. So we ended up again with quite a deficit. And what's interesting is you don't see any of the real hot spots where you see the higher like localized rainfall totals. So everywhere was pretty much dry, with the exception of the very northern bits of the system. Next slide, please. So July did not get any better for us in terms of rainfall. It was actually the driest July we've had since our record started back in 1990. We only had about 4.3 inches. So, you know, about 50% of average, or less than 50% of average. It's very unusual for that. So unusual, we've not seen it before. It's ranged before from 14 inches we've seen in the past. So it's very odd. And some of the two notable locations, if you want to look at Freedom Park and Rookery Bay, those two locations got more dry season style rainfall totals than wet season. Not even 2 inches at Rookery Bay rain gauge in the whole month of July. So The only area that got any relief was really Fakahatchee Strand and maybe very eastern portions of Faka Union. But the rest of the basins were very, very low and dry. Next slide, please. So now we're here, fast forward to August, here we are almost done with August. And unfortunately that trend has not yet changed for us. So far, we only got 4.5 inches of rain this month on average. Some areas out east and Barron River and East Collier did receive some nice rainfall, but the totals inland have just been very lackluster. And we'll see how we finish the month, but I'll talk a little bit more on how we might expect to finish the month here towards the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. So I'll spend a little time here. This is one way we measure the water year for us. And so instead of doing calendar year, we talk about the water year, and that starts May 1st and ends the following April. And so really the clock resets at the end of dry season and restarts. So you can kind of see if you look at the blue chart, the blue graphs, you can kind of see we get most of our rainfall this time of year. It's definitely a wet season. That would be nice to see the red bars closer to the blue bars and hit right about average, but we have not seen that, as I've indicated before. And so really the way to think about this is how much rain do we get, at least for us, how much rain do we get in the wet season? Will that carry us through the dry season? Because the rainfall totals then are only 1.5 to 2 inches on average once you get past November 1st. So again, we've got almost a foot deficit here. That's basically missing over a month's worth of rainfall for us. So definitely something we've been tracking and definitely unusual. Next slide, please. So you saw in the last graph how important the wet season rainfall was, but what I wanted to highlight here is that it's somewhat unique for the district, that our area is more dependent on wet season rainfall than maybe other areas. Every place has a wet season, dry season in the district, but ours might be more pronounced to favor wet season. Maybe we're more dependent on rainfall in the wet season. So on the right-hand side of the screen, the red colors, that means about 80% of our rainfall comes this time of year. If you look on the very East Coast, they're more equally split. Maybe 60% of the rainfall falls during wet season. So they get a little bit more balancing throughout the year. Even the rest of the district looks that way. So it's definitely unique for the Southwest coast. And then if you look on the left side of the screen, these are a series of plots of accumulated rainfall since 2002. So the green line, for example, is 2017. That's the year we've received the most amount of rain. And then the orange line is 2007. That is the minimum amount of rain we've received in a calendar year in that time frame. The black line is the average. The red line is where we are today, and it's very closely following that 2007 line. It's almost a little flatter than that. The slope of that line is almost a little flatter than that for the last month and a half. So we're definitely on track to have a dry year, but I want to iterate that just because we're dry now, Mother Nature can change things very quickly. Take a look at the green line towards the beginning of September. That's Hurricane Irma. It definitely can Mother Nature can change our conditions very, very quickly. So just wanted to, highlight that we still have a good portion of wet season left, and we're not quite sure what Mother Nature is going to give us. So we'll just, but it is worth talking about how dry it's been. And if average rainfall continues, we'll definitely end up on the low side of things. Next slide, please. So we've had no rainfall. What does that mean for our canal levels and discharges out of the system? Basically, the takeaway here is they've been basically almost nothing. For example, you see GG1 there says 0.9. That's 900 acre feet discharge since May 1st through now. Normally that number is 90,000 acre feet. So it's 1% of average for this time of year. Henderson Creek 1, we've had no discharges. Cocoa 1, almost none. Even Picayune Strand, those are the two pump stations combined, it only gives us 5.8 or 5,800 acre feet discharge, which is well below normal. I think the last Andrew mentioned we haven't really pumped anything other than the electrics, which is true, and they're easily keeping up with the water levels upstream. So it's really interesting to see this. And then if you want a visual effect of what that looks like, the right side of the picture there, low water Cork 3, that is the very top of our system. That's just west of the Cork 2 that I spoke about in my last presentation. And usually that canal is completely full. That black pipe that's shown there is usually completely submerged and actively discharging. So there is no water being discharged from the natural areas yet at this point. And really that is just very, very low. So it's important to remember, even though the water levels may look normal, which will be on the next one, what's interesting is that there's zero flow. Next slide, please. So this slide here, I want to talk a little bit about, and there's a lot of different colors floating around on here. And usually this time of year, they'd either be all green and blue, because we usually have more than enough rain to move around the system where we want it and where it needs to be. This year, we've been basically fully dependent on rainfall and the localized area where it falls. And so that's why you have a big mix of the different colors. And so just to spend a little time on it, the different colors are, if you see reds and oranges, that means the water levels are in their lower percentiles for August. If you see blacks and blues, they're in their upper percentiles for this time of year. So generally speaking, it's definitely a mix, but the important part is that there's no discharges. Water levels may be sitting at a normal level, but no water is moving anywhere. So it's very, very strange. And then on the corkscrews regional ecosystem on the right, just a handful of monitoring stations that we do have. Most of those are at their historic lows or near it. There's one isolated spot that's doing okay right there in the middle that has the green indicator, but generally speaking, it's quite dry. Next slide, please. So I will take a little bit of time on this first one. I've got several slides that look similar to this. But basically what this is this one's Golden Gate Canal. And I picked two water control structures, GG1, which is our coastal, and GG4, which is kind of halfway up the system. And really the way you want to interpret these, the hatched blue, the light blue boundaries, if you're within that range, the blue line, that would be our normal operational range. If we had all the water in the world and knew what to do with, we would keep it in that range. Well, maybe not all the water in the world, but if we had the right amount of water, we keep it in that range. The green band, so that's kind of your normal trend. That's the 75th percentile to the 25th percentile. So it kind of gives you some idea of where these canal levels are historically. And then the two on the upper and the lower, those are the maximum levels for that any particular day. And this is over the period of record for each of these structures. So really the takeaway that you see on these charts is, GG4, you can see the water levels in the green, but usually it's in the green and discharging, a couple hundred CFS or more every day. And in this case, it's not moving anything. Same thing with GG1. You see that kind of up and down pattern that started in June. That goes from 4 down to 3 and all the way back up. We're still not discharging any water. Those recessions are just water being used out of the canal and ET and just lack of rainfall. So it's not water moving out of the system. So definitely interesting to see how it responds in wet season without additional rainfall. Next slide, please. So this one moves up north a little bit to the Cocohatchee. The graphs are similar, so you can interpret them the same way. But the takeaway on these is that the Coco number 3 still has not recovered to its normal operational level, really. It's bouncing around the very bottom. We recovered from our dry season low, but if you parallel and look back at where the water level was at the bottom of that blue band back in March, that's about where we are now. So that's about how much water we have in the system currently is about what we had in March, give or take. Coco 1 is similar, very little discharges out of that. And even those declines that you see on the purple line those are all from basically water withdrawals or ET. Those are not discharges out of the system. Next slide, please. So here's Faka Union Canal. We've got FU1 all the way down by Port of the Islands and 41, and Faka Union number 5 almost all the way up in the system. So Faka Union number 5 is one of the few areas that does have enough water to hold up water levels to the top of the blue range. But unfortunately, the pool there is not large enough that we'd be able to then move that downstream to fill up any areas downstream without sacrificing benefit, groundwater levels in the Faka Union area. So we're basically operating in water conservation mode and trying to hold back as much as we can, as high north or east in the system as possible. Next slide. Got more here on Henderson Creek. The takeaway on all of these is just everything's way below average. It usually jumps back up pretty quickly when June starts. You can see the green bands as they get up towards their normal operational range in the middle of June, and they just have not this year. So these are all well below 25th percentile, and some even at were at record lows at some points during the summer, like Henderson Creek number 2. Next slide. So Picayune Strand restoration, how much have we actually pumped this year versus last year? That question was asked, and I've got the flow for both pump stations on the bottom axis for both stations. So let's start with Merritt. You can see, we started off pumping pretty good in June, and we had a little bit of rainfall in early July. But if you look at the y-axis, the scale there, it only goes and peaks up at about 80 CFS. If you want to contrast what we were doing last year, we were probably pumping 400 or 500 CFS at Merritt last year, this time of year. As we moved into September, we were pumping 800 CFS a day at Merritt. And here today, we're basically running one low flow pump, and that's about 40 CFS a day. You got the same story over at Faka Union Canal, the S487 pump station as well, very low. The design capacity of that one is 2,600 CFS, and we're only moving about 50 CFS per day. So definitely a stark contrast to where we were last year. But that's what Mother Nature has given us. We've are completely rainfall driven and have to deal with what we receive from the sky. Next slide, please. Talked a lot about canal water levels. Let's talk about groundwater very briefly. What's interesting on this one, you see similar trends for the most part, that everything's below normal with the exception of the one to the C462 up in Immokalee. That one's still near normal, but the one that really sticks out as low is the one over by Coca 1 on the very far left side of the screen. You're looking at water levels at that particular groundwater station closer to what you would see in March, like I indicated on the previous slide. So definitely tracking these water levels. You can see on the right, lots of reds and oranges, and that is similar to the last couple slides I showed where it was the reds are at their lower percentiles for their period of record. So definitely things are lower than normal for August. But again, I want to continue to emphasize we're not done with wet season yet, and there is potential more rainfall on the way. Next slide. So what can we expect going forward? So we look at NOAA gives us a long range outlook, 3-month outlook ahead, and it's based on climatologic factors. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get a flood or a drought. It just gives us an indication that water levels will be above or below normal, or have a chance to be above normal potentially. So this particular year, we're in an El Nino condition in the Pacific Ocean, which that has an effect on our climate in South Florida. And generally that means in the winter that we have a wetter and cooler dry season. It doesn't mean you're going to have a full-blown wet season. It doesn't mean we're going to get 10 inches of rain in any given month. It just means it may be above normal and a pretty good chance for that. So the likelihood and how much rain we get will still be, day-to-day forecasts and all of that. But it is something we look at and try and plan for throughout the district. Next slide, please. So I will close here or stop here with the short-term forecast. This has changed a little bit since this morning's forecast came out. So I'll focus first over on the top right. That's our hurricane activity season. So we're just passing, August 20th. We're here at the 25th. Season doesn't peak till the 10th and really doesn't die out until, the second half of October. So we've still got a ways in front of us with storms. We do have a lot of activity in the tropics today. The graphic has been updated today. The disturbance that is near the Yucatan Peninsula, that's now a 70% chance of formation in the next few days rather than 60. So with that being said, we do have an increased chance of rainfall next week, early next week, as that whatever that ends up being does get closer to Florida and may start to affect our weather. One of the things is that it seems like it may have not the most favorable conditions for strengthening into something strong, but you never know what Mother Nature will give us. So we'll be monitoring that closely and we'll take actions, as necessary, seeing how it turns out. And so remember the big takeaways here, that the dryness we've had this year has been definitely abnormal. But remember, it's not over until the wet season's over, and then we can really start to assess on where we are done with the season at. I'll close there, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are any board members have questions? I have one for you, Brad. At what point, if the dry conditions continue, would we as district make recommendations for increased water conservation measures?
So that's a discussion with the Water Supply Bureau and all of that. They track those weekly. We get weekly reports on that. And they basically can start to forecast out, where we might think levels might be once we get closer to the end of the wet season and kind of figure out where we're going to end up. So but probably early this dry season would be something that would be at least looked at, depending on long range forecasts and everything. But that's really the Water Supply Bureau kind of makes those recommendations to the executive team, I believe.
Okay, and then they come through Lisa. How do they get communicated?
We would be part of it, but Mark Elsner would be making those recommendations
To the local communities.
And, would be keeping the governing board aware of implementing water restrictions.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate that. Any other questions for Brad? Oh, that was your question?
Yeah,
Well, okay, all right, great. Then we're good. We're moving on. Thank you, Brad. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Our staff reports are next, and Candy, we have the monthly financial report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The monthly financial report that is in your packet is through June 30th. So for the new board members, the reason why it is June versus us being in August and you having a July, end of month July, is the way our accounting periods work, that 15 days after a month ends, the month is closed. So July was not closed until the middle of August. So staff then pulls that data for July, puts the report together, analyzes it, sees if there's any issues. And then for the month of July, for example, we're meeting around September 1st to discuss that. So through the month of June, one of the main takeaways is that you've collected all of your revenue. So you have an additional $135,000 that has been collected. What that means is revenue above and beyond what we had anticipated to cover your recurring expenses when we adopted the budget for 23. That additional revenue then helps fund future needs, one-time expenses, because it falls to cash balances. As far as your expenditures right now are 58% obligated. You will never fully be obligated, hopefully, knock on wood, because you have your 2 million emergency reserves that we hopefully do not have to use because we don't have an event that causes us to have to do so. So we're 58% obligated, and we've collected all of our revenues. So financially, the basin is in good standings.
Okay, any questions for Ms. Heater? I don't see any questions. Thank you so much, Candy. All right, that brings us to our last general public comment period. So it's another chance for members of the public to comment on things that aren't on the agenda. Troy, do we have public comment?
I have one registered speaker here in the room, Ray Bearfield.
Madam Chair, new and returning board members, thank you very much for the opportunity to introduce myself. I recently was named the Waterkeeper for Collier County. We are a subgroup under the International Waterkeeper Alliance. We operate, there are roughly 307 groups. We are attempting to kind of revitalize our presence in Collier County. We started in 2018. And we are now in the process of, we have a new board of directors, and we are looking for opportunities to reach out in the community, especially with agencies such as your own, to become partners in the combined mission of protecting drinkable, swimmable, fishable water for future generations and for the people who are here today. Toward that end, we would welcome the opportunity to become involved, whether we can, participate, whether it's helping to publicize what you do or offer the expertise that our board of directors might have toward your objectives. And that's pretty much it. So thank you very much for today. It was a very informative session. Learned a lot, took a lot of notes, and I will probably be getting in touch definitely with Mr. Hill, because as a former fishing guide and someone who's monitored the situation in the Everglades for probably the last 40 years, I share your concerns about what's going on there. And so I will leave it at that. Good day.
Thank you for being here today, and also one of your board members too. It's great to have him here too.
Thank you. How remiss of me. My associate board member, Wayne Moss, who retired from Fish and Wildlife Commission and has extensive boots on the ground experience in the lower blocks in Picayune Strand. He represents the 10,000 Islands district for the Waterkeeper. And he will be, I'm sure, very happy to participate in anything that we can do going forward as well.
Thank you for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Madam Chair, I have no other speakers here in the room and no hands raised on Zoom at this time.
Okay, that brings us to our final board comment. This is the opportunity for a second opportunity for the board to make any comments that you have on your mind. Mr. Romano, anything? Okay, Vice Chair Waters. Mr. Hill?
Fine.
Ms. Smith? Yeah. Okay, great. Ms. McLeod?
No, ma'am, thank you.
Okay, well then I'm going to close the meeting by thanking everyone for participating, and I really appreciate the district staff's work on bringing us to a landing for our budget and our millage. That's a huge undertaking. I also want to thank the entire district staff for their support of the Big Cypress Basin Board, and also Ms. Keeler and your team at the Big Cypress Basin for onboarding the board members, the new board members, getting us all up to speed, the returning members. And it's been a busy time, and you and your team have have done an excellent job, and that's with a couple spots short. So great job to everyone. Thank you for the excellent meeting. And Yvette, a hero's applause for you. You are working in West Palm Beach. You're coming over here to work at the Big Cypress Basin. You're filling in for a lot of hats, and you have done a terrific job. And I want to say thank you to you. And also Scott came over to take the photos today, and just appreciate all of the great support and all of the professional support that you all provide each and every time. So thank you with that. And our next Basin Board meeting is October 27th. And with that, I'll adjourn.